welcome to another episode of the Preparedness Podcast, the podcast that brings you the best in preparedness information. You can find us online at thepreparednesspodcast.com. My name is Rob Hannes, and I'm the host for the show. You can email me directly at rob@prepcast.info. The only announcement I really have to make in this podcast is that I'm starting to put the podcast out on YouTube. A couple people have related to me that it would be easier for them to listen to the podcast if it was on YouTube, because I guess basically because it's easy as going to a web page and clicking the play button. So I've been starting to do that with the new podcast. I've been putting up all the new series. So basically from 114 on, I've got only a few more to go to get them all up there. I don't know if I'm going to be putting the old podcasts up there or not. It really comes down to a matter of time. But from this point on, all the new podcasts will be posted onto YouTube basically at the same time I release the podcast. The topic for this podcast is learning basic survival skills. Or another way of looking at this is what you can do if you don't have the money to buy equipment and supplies for your preps. And this question came to me from Chris from Australia, who's 14, and he wrote to ask me what he can do to get better prepared, even though he's not able to actually buy equipment yet. And I think this is a good question. So, Chris, thank you for writing in and asking this, because I think this is probably something I should have addressed earlier. First, I want to say, Chris, I'm impressed that you're, at 14, you're already looking at being prepared and seeing how important it is. So kudos to you. And the second thing I want to say is make sure that you ask your parents for help on any of the topics I'm talking about that you would need help with, say, like starting a fire or, camping out in the wilderness, stuff like that. I don't want you to get hurt. Safety is the number one priority in both normal times and in a survival situation. So let's always keep that at the forefront of our awareness. So what can you do if you don't have the money to actually start buying, food storage and water filters and stuff like that? And this doesn't just apply to young people who are starting out, which I honestly have to say, I think it's great. I've had several people around Chris's age email me, and I think it's really great that the younger generation has taken interest in this. I know it's probably a social commentary that people this young are looking at the world and saying, I should probably be prepared because I don't know what's going to happen. But I think it's good that they are getting prepared and they're looking at these, because I think the more people that take responsibility for their own welfare, I think the better a society will be. But also, there are many people who, for one reason or another, are really struggling to make ends meet, and they can't put away food. They don't have the extra money to buy extra food for food storage or guns and ammo and packs and all this other stuff. But there is still plenty that you can do on a low or no budget that is very important, and that is learning, getting a survival education, if you want to call it that way. And I've got a list here that I'm going to go over of the things that you should learn how to do. Knowledge is power. The more you know how to do these things, the more confident you are in knowing that, okay, if something were to happen and we had to bug out, and even though I have a minimal amount of supplies, I'm confident that I'm going to be able to take care of myself and my family because I know how to do all these things. We can go into the wilderness, the forest, and survive because, even though it's going to be really tough, I know how to do it. And I think that's really important. Now, that also is to say, just because you can afford equipment and gear and guns and ammo and really cool technical gear and stuff, that doesn't mean that you should know these. You should know these. These are the core survival skills that every prepper should know. The way I look at it is preparedness is what you do to get ready for a survival situation. And when you're in a survival situation, then that's where you use your survival skills. I understand it's probably a fine line for some, but that's how I define it. So you need to work on your survival skills, even if you're just a prepper, because when it comes to that point where you need to use your preparedness supplies and your preparedness equipment, you're going to need survival skills. I've got a list of skills here that I'm going to go over that I think are the core survival skills that everybody should know. But before we do that, I'm going to talk about our first sponsor, and I actually think this ties right into what we're saying, and that's seedsnow.com. We've been talking about the economy and inflation and how prices are going up, and it's not too difficult to see that having your own garden to be able to grow some of your own food is going to become very important. It's now autumn across the country of the United States, and this is a good time to start planning next year's garden. Once the holidays hit, time seems to just fly right by them. Before you know it, it's going to be time to plant the seeds. If you want to sprout your seeds before you plant, you're going to have to plant them inside even sooner. Now is the time to start planning for this. Go to seedsnow.com and take a look at all the seeds that they have for all the sorts of vegetables and stuff that you can grow. If you haven't had a garden before, it's really kind of cool to grow your own food. If you have had a garden before, you know how cool it is. And one of the great things about seedsnow.com is that it's non-GMO seeds. These are the heirloom seeds that you can take and you can grow, then take the seeds from that food, save up the seeds, and grow it again next year. And you can keep doing this over and over again. Even if you don't have time for a garden, as a prepper, you should be thinking, what if? What happens in the future? What if I absolutely need to grow? Seedsnow.com, their seeds, they're not packed in these little paper envelopes that absorb moisture and stuff. No, these seeds are packed for long-term storage, and they can tell you exactly how to store them for the longest shelf life of your seeds. Seedsnow.com is going to be one of the best places you can go and get your seeds. And right now, Seedsnow.com is extending to the listeners of the Preparedness Podcast a 10% discount on their order. Now, these seeds aren't very expensive to begin with. An extra 10% is just awesome. Go to the website or go to my website, click on their banner, and when you go to order, use the coupon code PREP10, PREP10, and you're going to get your 10% discount at seedsnow.com. Gardening is definitely one of the survival skills you should know. However, it's kind of a more advanced level because it generally requires you to be, stable at one place for a long time. The survival skills that I was talking about before are more fundamental. They're the ones that are going to help you get through a bad situation. And that bad situation may be you're stuck from some sort of transportation accident, or maybe you're stranded, or perhaps you have to flee and bug out from your home and seek shelter in the nearby forest or the wilderness. These are the skills that you're going to be able to use to stay alive. These skills also translate fairly well into an urban environment. You still need the basics of shelter, water, food, fire, safety, and so these aren't just wilderness skills. You can use these skills anywhere. Now, as I go over these skills, they're not in any particular order, and the reason I do that is because the most important skill that you need is highly dependent on the situation you're in. If you're stranded in the winter, warmth and shelter is probably the most critical. If you're just lost, then navigation becomes, your most important skill. If you're injured, then first aid becomes your most important skill. So it really depends on what is happening to you or what has happened to you and what your immediate concerns and needs are. So in no particular order, we're just going to cover these. While I'm going to give some examples on these skills that I'm talking about, I don't really have the time to be able to go over all of these because I'm covering a wide range of skills. I'm going to try to do a different series on these and cover more examples of this stuff. I'll be rolling out some examples of what I'm talking about, but for the most part, I'm really just covering the skill set itself. The first thing is how to make fire. Fire is very important. You can cook with it. You can get warm with it. You can fire harden wood with it for tools and weapons. You need to know how to make a spark, a variety of different things. You need to know what makes a good tinder. Know where to find dry tinder in a wet forest. There's always dry tinder around. You need to learn where to find that. Learn different ways to stay warm, like a fire bed. This is a technique where you basically dig a shallow pit, burn a fire that's got some rocks in there, and then you tamp it down and cover it, and that earth will stay warm. Things like that become very useful when you're out in the middle of nowhere. Learn to build shelter from surrounding materials. This is not, with a tarp that you brought or a tent. This is, you're out in the middle of the wilderness and you're using all the materials that are around you to build a shelter. Know where and where not to make your shelter. You don't want to make it, say, for example, in a dry creek bed or a stream bed and then have a flash flood come in the middle of the night and wash you away. Know about how to create insulation and waterproofing from the natural materials. This is actually a very important skill in all the natural shelter buildings, because you typically are building shelter because you want to stay dry, you want to stay warm. A couple of the types of shelters you would want to learn that are easy are debris huts, wickiups, lean-tos, teepees, and if you do have a tarp, there's a variety of different ways you can actually make shelters with a tarp. Know all these things. These are relatively easy to learn. They don't take much in the way of cost. It's just really just some time. The next thing I have is locate and purify water. Of course, water is very important to stay alive. You need to know what the likely places are to find standing water. Additionally, there are some ways to know where you can dig and find water. And, of course, you're going to need to know how to make an expedient water filter in order to be able to use that water. Of course, if you can figure out a way to boil that water, that helps too. But if you don't have anything at your disposal right away, at least until you make some tools and fire and stuff, knowing how you can filter that water, make it as clean as possible, is going to go a long way. Know how to forage and hunt. Learn what your local animals are. You don't have to become a big game hunter, but at least know what's available. You want to know how to skin and quarter these animals. Learn how to fish, not only with fishing pole and lures and bait and stuff, but expedient-wise, take a look at what's around you, a stick, maybe make some yarn out of some cord, not yarn, but cordage out of the vegetation that's there. Fashion a hook out of a thorn or a twig of some sort and see what you can do to catch fish that way. I was fishing in a lake when I was in college, and it was actually a very popular lake, well known for fishing. And I took out just a line and a hook, and there was this little pool, and it had some small fish in it. I think there were small panfish like bluegill or sunfish or something like that. And I put the hook in. I didn't have any bait on it at all. And these fish were going after the hook, and I was able to catch a couple of them without anything on that hook at all. So, it is possible. Of course, the last time I tried this, the trout in the stream didn't want anything to do with what I was throwing at them. So it's experience. It's knowing what works. Keep trying things. Learn what plants are edible in your area, and also learn what plants are poisonous and not edible. Knowing what not to eat is probably just as important as knowing what you can eat. Learn how to cook. You get the fish, you get the animal. Sometimes the plants need to be cooked a certain way in order to take out the tannins or the resins, so you can eat them, or at least so they're edible. Learn how to do that. In addition to the field craft of cooking, out in the wilderness, learn how to preserve food, specifically like dehydrating, because you can dehydrate all sorts of meat and plants and stuff, but even as much as canning, if you do have the equipment, learning how to preserve food like that goes a very long way. You need to know basic first aid and CPR. Not even sure if we need to even expound on that because it's very fundamental that you need to know how to take care of yourself. Even the basics of just, scratches and cuts and falls and bruises and stuff. Know how to forecast the weather for your area. When you don't have access to shelter like a house, it really becomes important to know what the weather's going to do. Is there a storm coming, or is it going to be super sunny where you're going to have to shade yourself so you don't get sunburned, stuff like that. Closely related to weather is navigation. Learn how to make a sun compass so you can find the direction, not just by looking at the sun, but knowing exactly where south is or exactly where north is, regardless of what time of the day is. Learn the constellations and how to tell north and south by them. Now, the constellations in the southern hemisphere are different than those in the northern hemisphere. In the northern hemisphere, at least we have what we call the northern star, which is almost directly above the North Pole. In the southern hemisphere, I've never been there, but from what I've read and seen, they use the Southern Cross to approximate the southern pole area, but it's still even just a general direction of that way south can go a long way of knowing which way you're walking. Additionally, learn how to read a map, how to draw a map, and how to use a compass. And with that are knowing what declination and azimuth are. Those are very important aspects of using a map and compass. You want to be able to read the terrain as well. Look at the terrain that you see and find that on the map, as well as look at the map and see what the map is showing you and be able to tell, that's a cliff, that's a stream, that's a sloping hill, that's a steep hill. That will help you plan routes on the map before you even get to see what the terrain really looks like in real life. You know what? You need to know knife skills, not only the safe way of using a knife, but things like whittling, how to whittle a spear, how to chop a tree or make firewood, how to build a trap, something you can. Building a trap with sticks takes a lot of knife work because you have to make notches and stuff. You need to know how to do that. Additionally, you should know how to make improvised weapons. This includes spears, clubs, rabbit sticks, which are these kind of like a boomerang, but it's more of a curved stick that you flick at rabbits. Even a bow. If you can know how to make these things, then you have the ability to defend yourself better, whether it's against 2 or 4-legged creatures. Another important aspect that's similar to making weapons is making tools. Just a couple of the common items that you can make are spoons and bowls, but also things like baskets and mats. These things seem very simple, but if you were to go to a museum of natural history and you look at how the native or the Aboriginal people lived and what they did, they were making baskets and pottery and mats and all this sort of primitive type of stuff, or at least what we consider primitive, but these items improved their standard of living immensely, and these are the exact same items that you should learn how to make yourself, because if you're stuck out in the wilds with nothing, having a basket that you can gather food in or carry supplies is going to be tremendous. Making a mat that you can sit on instead of the cold, wet ground is going to make your life just that much more comfortable and convenient. You should also try to learn how to camouflage yourself and be stealthy. This is not only against animals, but learn how not to be seen. Blend into the environment so that you can sit there, be still, and watch what goes on. You're also going to need to know how to do hygiene and sanitation in the field. Things like making cat holes, slit trenches, and privies. Know how to take a sponge bath. Learn what plants, if any, in your area can make soap. For example, the yucca plant in my area, the Southwest Desert, you can pound it on a rock or pound a leaf of it between two rocks and kind of break up the fiber, and then you wet it and you rub it between your hands and it makes soap, and that soap can get you clean. It's a lot better than just using water. Learn what kind of plants are out there that can do those sort of things. Probably the best way to learn this is, again, looking at what the Aboriginal or the native people did back before we had, modern technology. And the last thing I would add to this list that I probably don't see very much on a list of basic survival skills is learn to conquer your fears. If you can't conquer your fear, which means you no longer have that fear, then at least learn how to control that fear so that it doesn't overtake you and create you to do things that you wouldn't want to do, like run at the inappropriate time. You need to be able to think on your feet, and if you're afraid of something, then that fear can cause you to make bad decisions. There are many other skills out there that you learn. For example, I just thought of one, knots. I should have put that with shelter, because knowing how to make cordage, or if you've brought some cordage, knowing how to tie knots and be able to tie things together and lash things down are very important. These are the skills that you can keep with you for the rest of your life. And learning them as a young man, I think is great, because you're going to be able to practice these and learn these and keep them with the rest of your life. You'll never have to worry about suddenly being stuck out in the wilderness or stranded or away from home, because you'll have the confidence knowing that you can take care of yourself. As I said before, many of these skills also translate into urban survival skills, because with a little adaptation, it doesn't really matter if you're surrounded by trees or buildings. Just to reiterate, knowledge is power, and learning these skills now can make you more confident as a person, and it gives you the confidence to face whatever life will throw at you. I pulled some books down off my bookshelf, and these are the books that I have used to learn about survival skills over the past few decades and years. Some of them are newer, some of them are older, but all of them are still, I think they're still all available. I looked them up on Amazon, and I think even if they're available as a used copy, they're still out there. And there are many other books out there that will provide very good information, but these are the ones that I'm familiar with, so I wanted to pass them along. The first one I think you can look at is the Foxfire series. This is the one where the professor and his students, I think it was back in the 60s or 70s, went to the Appalachia mountains, and they wanted to log all the skills that the people there were using to live, because they were still using a lot of the old world, even in the 1970s, the old world skills for their daily lives. There's a lot of books in the series, and they cover a lot of things from, dressing a hog to building a log cabin, to, hunting tales and snake lore and stuff like that. So there's a lot in there, and it may or may not be what you're looking at. Another one I can recommend is the Tom Brown series. For example, Tom Brown's Field Guide to Wilderness Survival. He's got a couple other books like that, but this one is probably a good one that you could start with and look at some of the other ones. There's a couple military manuals that I really like. One of them is the ubiquitous Army Manual 21-76. It's the survival manual for the Army. The other one that I like a lot is the Air Force Survival Manual 64-4. I'm pretty sure both of these are available. Actually, I know the Army Manual is. I don't know about the Air Force Manual. I found it on Amazon, although it looks different than the one I have. The one I have is a big spiral-bound book, and the one on Amazon is it's a perfect bound or a stitch bound. But I think it's the same manual. One of the books I read when I was younger, and I really enjoyed it because it had a lot of good information in it, is the complete book of Outdoor Survival by J. Wayne Fears. This one is still available, although I think it might be only available through used books. But this is another good general, actually all these books are very good overall general wilderness survival books. They got a lot of skills in them, and I recommend that you look at more than just one so you can get a wide range of ideas and techniques for the same thing. There's lots of ways to start a fire, lots of ways to hunt, lots of ways to get water. A couple more that I have here, a few more. Camping and Wilderness Survival by Paul Torrell. How to Stay Alive in the Woods by Bradford Angier. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that name right. And The Outdoor Survival Handbook by Raymond Mears. Now, these 8 books are only 8 among probably hundreds of survival manuals out there, and simply because I didn't list it doesn't mean it's not good. These are just some of the ones that I pulled off my shelf that are among the better ones that I have. Again, I recommend going to the library and checking out these books. You can usually do that for free. I would recommend going to your local museums and finding out about how the Aboriginal or the native people lived back before we had technology where they had to make everything themselves. That'll be a really good education on what worked, because that's what the people were using, especially if you pay attention to what they were using, what type of plant they were using, what they ate. Typically will show you what's growing in the area and will probably still be growing in the area, and those will be the things that you can use. Now I'll have a list of all the books that I just listed on the show notes for this podcast, so you'll be able to just click on them and go to Amazon and take a look. Chris, I want to thank you for emailing me with this question. I think it was a really great question, and I hope I was able to impart some information that will help you get better prepared, even though you don't have the money to be able to go out and buy things. Education and learning are power. And there are many things that you can do for free or very low cost that you can learn and develop skills that will last you a lifetime. I think being a young man is a great time to be able to learn these things, because having been there and having been where I'm at now, I can tell you that as you grow older, time seems to be a commodity that becomes more and more difficult to take advantage of. I want to thank everybody for downloading and listening to the podcast. And I want to thank our sponsors, Sun Oven, thesurvivalmom.com, LPC Survival, where you can get the Berkey water filters, Backwoods Home Magazine, Flying Eagle Gold, Legacy Foods at buyemergencyfoods.com, and campingsurvival.com. You can reach me through the website at thepreparednesspodcast.com, at Facebook at facebook.com/preparednesspodcast, and on Twitter as Prepcast. And of course, you can always email me directly at rob@prepcast.info. Thanks for listening, and until next time, enjoy life and be safe.